All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast, and I'm excited to welcome back a very special guest to the show, my brother, Zach Guerrero. Zach, what's going on, brother? Thanks again for joining me, and welcome back for round 3.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Yeah, happy to be back.
I've decided to come up with a term for all returning guests on the podcast. I was thinking about going with repeat offenders for the podcast. So here you are. You are now officially repeat offender status. Well, you were the second time you came on the show technically, but here we are, round 3. So repeat offender yet again. So, all right, man. Well, kind of just kicking this thing off. Just to kind of get a little bit of an introduction for anyone who might not have heard any of our previous conversations. You've been around the world a bit. You've lived in Central America for a time. You and I, we've trekked through the Sahara Desert together, riding camels, and you've been to some other places as well. Just kind of tell us this adventurous spirit that you have and that you're still kind of cultivating. Where did this come from? Where did this adventurous spirit come to dwell within you?
Well, I guess probably if you want to go way, way back, just as you grew up in the same house, we weren't by any means, super wealthy or anything like that, but our parents always did a really, really good job taking us on family vacations and going on these little adventures. And whether it was by the time we were 5 going down the Al Salvo River or, adventures up north, going down to Kentucky, Tennessee. So, I've always just really liked traveling. So it's just, as I grew up, it just kind of grew with me and, moving far away in college in a very northern university, I think that was probably what really unlocked it, was going to school at Michigan Tech. And probably when I got my job working on the Isle Royale Queen 4 was when things really turned up and I started doing a lot of backpacking and stuff like that. So that's, probably I'd say when I was exposed to it in college is when things really, really ramped up.
Yeah, and of course, growing up, you and I, we've kind of had the fortune of being in a little bit more of a rural area. We're kind of from a small town farming community. We had a pretty big spacious property growing up. And one thing I felt that mom and dad did very well for us, even though you and I kind of grew up in the era of, video game systems and things like that, they still very much insisted that, we put down the controllers, we get outside and we, mess around, roll around in the mud, scrape our knees, get dirty and everything. Or when we would ever have a gathering with our cousins, either for like Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, we're outside playing tag or Ghost in the Graveyard or something like that. So would you say that maybe just simply where we grew up? Just even if we weren't traveling on a family vacation, would you just say even that the setting that we grew up in kind of maybe had something to do with this adventurous spirit as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the rural setting, the rural environment, kind of being, in a way, forced to use your imagination for entertainment, which is what, kids are supposed to be able to do. But,
right, yeah.
As, the information technology age, that seems to be becoming less and less of a thing. But we were always outside. We were always playing, riding bikes and, like riding down to the mansion on Hasslick Road and, stuff like that. That definitely played a big part, I would say, for us growing up, just kind of cultivating just the imagination, So it was a good environment to cultivate an adventurous spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here because, we've talked about some of your adventures and, your previous appearances. And, we talked about it, like I said, your time in Central America and the time that you and I were in Morocco. So I definitely will encourage our listeners to go and check out those episodes as well, like once they're done listening to this one. But, I kind of want to talk about some of your more recent adventures that you and I have gotten to do together. This is back towards the end of June. You were able to make your way down here to Florida. Of course, I've been living here for a couple of years now, and this is your first time being able to make it down and see me. So just, kind of, I guess, like, what were your sort of like your first impressions? Because you met me in the Panhandle, which any other time we've been to Florida before, it was either like, Orlando or maybe like an Atlantic coastal beach or something. So what were kind of your initial first impressions when you kind of first came in and around Tallahassee area?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, I was rather impressed with the Panhandle area from an environmental perspective.
Oh, really?
Right?
How so? Like,
well, Southern Florida, like the coasts, they get so much attention, and I think it's undeserved. Like, it's undeserved. Like, not gonna lie, I've been to Jacksonville, I've been to Daytona, basically everything Atlantic side, I think, in my opinion, kind of sucks. Fort Augustine was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Man, that's probably the only place on the Atlantic coast where I was like, wow, this is actually pretty neat, just because there's some history there, with the old base and all that stuff, or the fort. And, but yeah, it's just mile after mile after mile of dirty beaches. And I was surprised when we took that drive to Panama City, how beautiful some of those beaches were. And I mean, that is Gulf side, and the Gulf side in general is typically, I think, more aesthetically pleasing than the Atlantic coast in Florida. But yeah, then there was just I think there's just a wider variety of environments, different types of vegetation. It seems like Southern Florida is kind of homogeneous to me. I mean, I may be wrong, but this is just kind of my memory. I haven't really been to Southern Florida in a while, but yeah. And so I think there's just more opportunity for kind of more outdoor things that aren't just go to the beach, go to the beach, go to the beach, go to the beach.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because typically when people get the image in their mind of what Florida is supposed to look like, you think of palm trees, you think of the big spanning beaches and so on and so forth. Everglades Swamp maybe might also come to mind, but the Florida Panhandle didn't really quite seem to really, I guess, showcase that idea. This is more or less, it was more of a Southern type sort of feel. You got like your Spanish moss trees and, various other hardwoods and things like that. And, you and I, we went for, a little bit of a day hike on your first day here shortly after you arrived. And, we're just kind of like going through the forest and, doesn't seem to resemble very much of Florida at all. It might even resemble a little bit of home, So yeah, I can definitely see what you're coming through there, but of course, then we also did get to go out on the water a little bit for kayaking, and you made a comment when we were swimming in the Big Blue Hole on the Wasissa River, and you said that water is your element. So I guess. And I will say you definitely swam a lot better than me that day. I'll tell you that. It's been a while for some reason since I've been in the water like that. But so where does the fascination with the water come from? Because, and I'm sure it's, again, probably going to go back to your upbringing, but fill us in on that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's really, there's really anything concrete to just support that. It's just, I've just always really felt comfortable in the water, on the water, around water. I mean, we all learned to swim at an early age. I mean, we were probably swimming at, 4 years old, maybe even younger than that. Going up to the Bourbon Barrel, which was, where all the family gatherings used to have. They had all those big ponds, and we were always swimming. And I was always fishing, and so I fished a lot, and um, yeah, and so regardless of the situation, I've always really felt like I've never, I've been on, boats. I've been on, big water, and obviously I understand how dangerous water can be, and so I have a healthy respect for water.
Sure. Yeah.
And but there's never really been a time where I've been uncomfortable or scared, whether it's going down a swift river or being on a boat in 12-foot waves in Lake Superior. Like, that's just, yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, I can see exactly where it comes from. And then, yeah, kind of going back to your experience when you're on the Isle Royale Queen, which, by the way, just to fill in a little bit of context here, in case anyone hasn't grasped this yet, Zach and I were from Michigan, and Isle Royale National Park is in Lake Superior. It's an island, a little bit more closer to Canada, though, isn't it? I think
it's way closer to Canada. You can't. I mean, maybe when you're on the ridge, you can see Michigan, but you can see Canada very easily. Canada and Minnesota. It's like 20 miles away from Canada, but it's over 50 miles away from Michigan.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because we were on that ferry for like 4 hours before we actually made it there.
Yeah, the Isle Royale Queen, it takes about 3.5 hours to get there. Yeah, and that goes out of Copper Harbor, Michigan, which is the farthest north you can get in the Upper Peninsula.
Right. Yeah. And then of course, like Lake Superior is just so vast. It's like, shoot, you might as well just be sailing on an ocean once you get away from land, because you lose all sight of land once you get out there. So
it's pretty crazy. How big that lake is. I mean, it's the largest lake in the world in terms of surface area. And when you're in the middle of it, it's a crazy feeling. It never gets old, which is, why the Kilpula family's been operating that boat for 49 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's been in the family for a very, very long time. It's pretty unfortunate that recently one of the captains passed away.
Oh, man.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, or maybe about a month ago, the oldest one, Don. So that was pretty sad. So really sad day for the community of Copper Harbor, because he's been living there since he was a teenager. I think he was 15 or 16 years old when he moved up to Copper Harbor, and so
stayed put. So, well, of course, and communities like that are pretty tight knit because, the Upper Peninsula is pretty sparsely populated compared to that of the Lower Peninsula. Not to mention that they all got to endure those brutal and harsh winters together, basically. So I mean, like, would you say that's what you kind of like picked up when you were living there? Just kind of like maybe a greater like sense of community, kind of being in that harsh environment together?
Yeah, I'd say so. Because Copper Harbor, it's a very small community. I mean, and it's, once you're there, I mean, it's, you get a sense of you're kind of at the end of the earth almost.
Mm-hmm.
You're as far north as the land can take you, and then beyond that is the largest lake in the world. And as I said before, it's really small. I mean, obviously it's a tourist destination too. So, there's a lot of seasonal workers that go up there. So, if you include them in the population, I mean, you might be looking at a couple hundred, but over the winter time, you may get 100 people that stay up there year round.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's pretty wild. Yeah. So if anybody has plans to travel to Michigan, that's definitely one spot you want to go check out at least one time.
Yeah, because even to this day, Isle Royale still remains my favorite national park, that I've ever been to. And, you and I, we've both experienced some pretty amazing national parks. I've been to the Badlands in South Dakota. You've made it all the way to Zion in Utah, which is an incredible national park too. But something about the magic of Isle Royale, I mean, it's just I can see why people are so adamant to go back there after they've been there once, so for sure. All right. Well, let's warm up a little bit, figuratively speaking, and get back down to Florida to hear a little bit more about your adventures down there. So, and it was also the first time you had visited Tallahassee, which again, Tallahassee, it's the capital city of Florida, but it's certainly not the one that stands out as a tourist destination. But so what was kind of your overall thoughts of just like Tallahassee in general? Like, what'd you think of the place?
Well, as far as city goes, I'm not a big city person fan.
Right.
I actually thought it was kind of neat just because, like, it's kind of right there in that sweet spot of being not too big, not too small, being kind of just right, so it doesn't take half the day to get from one side to the other,
Mm-hmm.
You can either drive through it or you can drive around it. It's your choice. But it's big enough where you have, it offers, a wide variety of activities that you can do, foods you can eat. I enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, because we found some green space where we were able to kind of go hiking and more or less get submerged and lost into the trees a little bit. But then, there's a lot of like local eating spots too, especially with this being a university town. You were able to kind of, I was able to take you to a couple of local eating spots that I think you enjoyed quite a bit. So, but I guess, just kind of before we leave the subject on your visit to Florida, it wasn't just Tallahassee that you came to. We tried to make our way around a little bit, but what would you say were some of your favorite spots, or I guess you'd say like highlights from your time here?
Oh, definitely the Wassissa River was the number one thing that we did there. I had a blast doing that. Oh man, it was, well, because the other thing that we never really got to mention, well, you brought it up a little bit about how the Panhandle is like, the South. Mm-hmm. And it's like, sometimes, like the South, gets attributed to be like, like redneck America,
Mm-hmm.
But that guy that rented us the canoes, I mean, he was like super nice guy, but he was like 5'3", a string bean of a man, all covered in tattoos, maybe missing a couple of teeth. And I'm like, yeah, this is the South. But and it's like, and if anybody out there played the video game Borderlands, this guy looked exactly like the guy Scooter in Borderlands. The Wassissa River, not to bash on Florida, but it is so gosh darn hot there. So being in some nice, cool, fresh water, that's like 70 degrees, if that, because it's all spring fed, so it's nice and cold. Like, oh yeah, that hit the spot. And then just the big blue hole. That was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Except I think we caught it on. Didn't we catch it like just after the rain, and that's why it was like murky? I think that's what our canoe guy, I think that's what he told us, that there was like with the rains, it was a little bit murky. We couldn't see too well down there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What'd you think of? Let's see. We went to Panama City briefly, and we also made it to St. George Island as well. What'd you think of those places?
Yeah, I thought Panama City was a kind of a very, very nice looking city. Because I don't think it's that big. We weren't there for very long.
No,
but again, I'd say it's probably kind of in that right size of not too big, not too small. But yeah, the island, that was very nice because, again, those other parts of Florida have, seem to corner the market on all, the beaches as terms of, they're the beaches to go to. But yeah, the beaches that we went to were great, and there was hardly anybody there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we caught it at a good time because we went there like on a Sunday afternoon. It was actually almost like kind of starting to near dark a little bit, and so we pretty much had the beach mostly to ourselves. I mean, there was still a few people there. And then, of course, you and I went to the very, very end of the park and to get that spot down there. But I don't know what it is, but the water was so nice. It was like bath water. It was
that water was really warm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like an Epsom salt bath or something like that. So yeah, it was really cool. So all right, well, cool, man. Yeah, so that was your experience in Florida, and definitely had a good time having you down there. It was it was good to kind of just to show you around, and also it gave me the reason to actually go to some of these places that I had been meaning to go to for a good while. But once you're like living in a place, though, you just kind of say, I'll get to it eventually. But then eventually, it doesn't really quite totally happen. So I had a reason to go, so that was good. But, you also kind of filled me in not too long ago that you kind of went to a few other places since then. And I just remember texting you, or I tried calling you one day and you sent me a text saying you were out near Boston hiking. And I'm just thinking, I didn't realize he was making his way all the way to Massachusetts this time around. But what kind of prompted that trip to head out there?
Well, so, I mean, Ben, he's been my best friend for a long time. And, over the years, I've got become pretty good friends with his cousins that live out there. And so his cousin, Conrad, he comes to Michigan 2-3 times a year. And almost every single time he's here, I hang out with them as a group. And so, and about a year ago, he started kind of ragging on me. He's like, oh, well, I'm always in Michigan. And you guys never come out to Boston, blah, blah, blah. And so then, I don't know, maybe like February or March of this year, I was like, all right, man, get it on the calendar. Let's make it happen. So we had it scheduled for I don't know, it was like sometime in September. It wouldn't have been very long after I went down to Florida. And then it got pushed back for a couple of reasons. So it ended up being in October. But we weren't exactly hiking. I said I was on the Freedom Trail, which isn't an actual hiking trail. It's walking through Boston.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was wondering, I'm like Freedom Trail. It's like, I know that sounded familiar, but I couldn't remember exactly if that was out in nature somewhere, in the forest, or was it just in the city itself? But okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we did do some hiking one day. I mean, Boston really only has one large green space in the city. And I forget what it's called. It's called the Fells or something like that. Which has a couple miles of hiking trails, but that's pretty much it as far as hiking inside Boston. I know there's what mountain? I can't remember. There's stuff outside of Boston if you're willing to drive a couple hours, but yeah. But anyways, yeah, so the Freedom Trail, it's a 3.5 mile walk through Boston, and it goes through all these historical sites that were relevant to the Revolutionary War and America getting its independence, hence it being called the Freedom Trail. So, you go by the old state houses where, John and Sam Adams used to meet to, debate and stuff like that. And you go by Paul Revere's house, which is still standing. And, so a lot of really neat historical sites. And you end at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was the first major skirmish of the Revolutionary War.
Right.
It was just really, really cool. And what's kind of neat about it is, it's cities expand and they kind of have certain areas that have certain types of architecture and, certain influences. Culturally speaking and all that stuff. And so Boston's actually a pretty remarkably diverse city. And so it takes you through the Freedom Trail goes through all these kind of very neat sections of Boston. So it's a pretty cool way. Doing the Freedom Trail is a pretty cool way to see most of the city of Boston too, while you're learning a lot of really cool American history.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what it is about Boston, why it's eluded me this much up to this point. You know, I mean, I've talked about going for like a while, and of course, as of right now, every single state east of New York has eluded me thus far. Like that whole like New England area there, like no go yet. So like you're in Boston just like around like October, like you said. Did you kind of get to see anything change up in the realm of like, you know, the autumn feel, leaves changing or anything like that? Because I think some people kind of associate areas of New England as being very scenic around autumn time. I don't know if you got to experience any of that while you were there.
No, not really. Nothing really comes to mind in terms of that. I honestly can't remember if it was. I think it was before the change. Yeah, because it was pretty early October.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, there really wasn't much in terms of leaves and stuff like that.
Gotcha. All right. Well, maybe another reason for us to go back there, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool. And, you know, I mean, Boston's about as big of a city as I am willing to travel to. I mean, it's 750,000 people. I mean, I never really see myself going to New York City or any place like that. But, yeah, Boston was really cool. So it's not too hard to get around. I mean, you do need to take Ubers and stuff like that in certain situations. But, yeah, some pretty cool things to see there. Unfortunately, you know, this was all during, you know, COVID time. So, you know, they had, you know, some dumb restrictions like, oh, if you go to a place, you can only have a group of 6 sit at a table, you know, and stuff like that. But for the most part, everything was open. One of the other dumb things too was I don't know if it was the city ordinance or the state law or mandate, but every place you went to, so bars that only served alcohol were all closed. So, but they couldn't close down food places. So, but every time you went to a place, you had to order food. You couldn't just order drinks, you had to order food. So, I mean, we just worked it out that everybody picked up a tab, you know, for the entire table. So we just order one appetizer for the table. So there had to be a food item per bill. So
yeah, it's the first I heard about that being put in place. Huh.
Yeah.
That's pretty bizarre. So, okay. Well, I guess, you know, even like restrictions aside, I mean, it sounds like you had like a pretty good time. So besides like the Freedom Trail, like was there other kind of like notable spots or I guess maybe places that you've eaten at that basically if someone were to go to Boston before too long that maybe you'd recommend or that they check out?
Yeah, there was one. Geez, I'm blanking on the name, unfortunately. No, not that one.
Of course, I'm sure there's a ton of like big eating places there that you really could have, you know, sought out and a good variety, I'm sure.
Yeah, hold on. We went to one place. Oh, yeah. It's called Warren Tavern, and it's in Charlestown, the Charlestown district of Boston, and it's one of the oldest restaurants in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, I'm reading it right here. Basically, in the 1770s was when it opened, and a lot of like a lot of the founding fathers used to frequent that place. You know, like Ben Franklin, George Washington, Paul Revere. So yeah, so we went there and yeah, we sat outside, had some drinks, had some food and stuff, and yeah, really cool place. Another old one which we didn't get to go to is the Union Oyster House. And then kind of around Harvard University, Harvard. Yeah, that's the one there. Yeah, there's kind of a lot of, you know, pretty neat, you know, local eateries. We went to a burger place there that was really cool. And, you know, a lot of famous people frequent that place. And
Gotcha. So, okay, a lot of good spots to see in the city. So, right on. All right. Well, like, looking ahead kind of into the future now of kind of like your travels and your adventurous spirit, big news that happened this year. You ended up getting married,
Mm-hmm.
so that was a really great thing to happen out of 2020 for us to see you get married. And what are your thoughts like on traveling, exploring, adventuring? As a married man now, I mean, unfortunately, you and your wife have done several things together, like already. Last time we had you on, you kind of told us a little bit about your trip, like out west and things like that. So, but what do you think the future of your travels and adventures looks like now that you're a married man?
Well, I mean, as of right now, I mean, it's just me and Caitlin, so the equation hasn't really changed. I mean, we've, traveled a ton, ever since we started dating. Our first trip was backpacking Pictured Rocks. And, I mean, it's been 2 years now since we've done something big, which was when we went to the Philippines 2 years ago. We probably actually got back, returned almost to this date, because we left late November and we were gone for 3 weeks.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, I mean, we've done a couple things since then. But, for now, when it's just, like I said, when it's just two, the equation doesn't change. But, if two becomes three, then obviously, the variables change. So until that happens, it's kind of business as usual. But, in a year or so, again, if that changes, we'll have to adjust. But, I mean, I love traveling. Caitlin loves traveling. So, even if we have a little one in a year or two, it's the style and the style of how we travel obviously has to change to accommodate these new variables. But I don't see it stopping us. So.
Right. All right. Well, do you all have like any travel plans in the works right now? Like any places standing out to you both that basically you think that would you want to maybe like line up for 2021?
Well, I would say probably what we had planned for what would have been the equivalent of our honeymoon in 2020, which had to get canceled. So
Right.
we plan on doing that. We did a substitute trip, which I can explain more, but what we had planned was in June after our wedding, we were going to go to Yosemite National Park and Sequoia National Park.
Mm.
So we were going to camp in Yosemite, and then we were going to Airbnb in Sequoia. And so, yeah, we had a great place lined up in Sequoia. Nice little ranch house. And but yeah, and maybe it works out, the way it's supposed to, because one of the main attractions for Yosemite is doing the Half Dome hike.
Right.
And so there's a lottery. You have to go, put your name in order to do the hike, because they only let a certain amount of people do it per day.
Mm.
And so we put our name in and we said, we have these 3 days that we want to try and get in, right? So, and we didn't get in. So, so if we do that trip again, or if we plan that trip in 2021, we have a second chance to try and get our names in for Half Dome.
Wow. I didn't realize it worked like that. So you actually kind of more or less have to win your spot on the rock, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, we can plan it a little bit better where, we're there in Yosemite more during the week instead of the weekend, because obviously more people are there on the weekend. So more names get put in. But if you were there for Monday through Thursday, and you put your name in for those 4 days, you have a pretty good chance of winning the lottery for one of those days.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. That's pretty interesting. Well, fingers crossed, your guys' names come up on that lottery when you guys decide to go out there. So that's still, well, that's probably got to be shitty for some people, though. I mean, if they are planning to go out into, that part of the country for a X amount of days or whatever, and they don't get selected for the lottery.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, what's crazy is when I was doing research on that, I got online and I checked out a couple of forums, and, there's some people that say that they've put their name in 10 years in a row, haven't gotten drawn a single time.
oh man.
Statistically speaking, I think it was like somewhere between like 25 to 30% chance of your name getting drawn.
Oh, geez.
So 1 in 3 to 1 in 4, again, depending on the day. So if you, again, if you put your name in during those weekdays, you have a much better chance. You probably have it close to a coin toss.
Wow.
Well, okay. And what's crazy is and I get it. Like, even when I did. So, I mean, you've done Angel's Landing.
Mm-hmm.
I've done Angel's Landing. And Angel's Landing is a tough hike. Like,
it is.
It is not easy. And when we were doing it, when Caitlin and I did it, it got to a point where I was like, they should probably restrict the number of people that do this hike.
Agreed. Yeah.
And it's just because you get, because even though it's hard, it's still doable for the normal person. Like, Half Dome is not doable for the normal person. Half Dome's like Angel's Landing on steroids.
Right.
And it's not necessarily because it's more difficult. It's just so much longer. Angel's Landing is like 4.5 miles round trip or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Half Dome is like 15 miles round trip.
Wow.
And it's all uphill. And it's like a 7,000 foot change in elevation or something like that. Like, it's ridiculous. So you have to be in really good shape to do it.
Right.
We also weren't in super good shape. So it's probably a good thing that that the trip didn't happen, because we probably would have just died on that mountain.
Well, fortunately now you got your fancy home gym set up, so you can start, training and preparing and everything. But yeah, that was like the interesting thing about, speaking of Angel's Landing, was that, and that's why I was so glad that I had arrived bright and early. Like, I actually rolled into the park even before the sun came up, so I could get to hike the landing pretty much straight away, because the problem, I think, since they don't restrict the amount of people that can go up there, it also gets very crowded as the morning goes on, and the ledges are narrow, and it's a rock scramble effectively is what it is that you have to do. And then you get occasionally some of those people who want to try to use the landing as sort of a means to get over their fear of heights, and then there was a couple of people who were really scared of the heights, and they're kind of, more or less freaking out, while they're getting close to these ledges, and they're with this crowd of people who's trying to get by. So yeah, that was interesting doing it that way. But, I think maybe though, if you do get to go on Half Dome and there's less people, that might really heighten the appeal of the place quite a bit more, because I feel like sometimes big crowds can really kind of ruin the appeal of a natural place. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Which is why, we typically stick to, or have stuck to, kind of the hikes that have a higher difficulty level, just because, it kind of, weeds out the weak, I guess. So yeah, you have the smaller crowds, and because we did the one hike that was just in Zion. It was the Emerald Pools hike, which was total sham, by the way. There are no emerald pools. but
good to know.
That was just jam packed full of people, and it's awful navigating around them. I mean, when we hiked up Angel's Landing, it was the same thing. We got up, at the crack of dawn. So hiking up was no problem because there's no traffic. But yeah, coming down is, it's an issue. Because some of those spots are they're pretty dangerous. If you got somebody who's just careless or has no idea what they're doing, even like people not wearing the proper footwear,
Right.
stuff like that get kind of, grinds my gears a little bit,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you need some footwear that's going to grip those rocks because and the area is not free of rainfall either. Like it actually, as I was coming off of the landing, it started raining, and it's just, and some of the rocks have some pretty smooth surface area, so you're having to really kind of just get into those little nooks and crannies, with the soles, with the front of my shoes and everything to make sure I didn't slip and fall. So for sure. All right. Well, also kind of looking ahead a little bit, as you kind of briefly mentioned, you are looking to become a father someday. So what do you think travel will kind of look like, not only as a father, but what would you kind of see travel serving as a sort of like a way to add value and instill life lessons and other aspects with your children someday? Because you kind of mentioned at the start of our conversation, as you were kind of growing up, like the travels that mom and dad took us on kind of instilled this adventurous spirit, and you kind of helped with your own development. What do you think that would look like for your kids, and how would you kind of want to I guess instill that, if you will, looking ahead a little bit here?
Yeah, man, that's a tricky question because it's at first I think it's got to start, or the earlier you can start with your kids, the better.
Right.
Some people think like, oh, well, I need to wait till they're 7 or 8 years old to go camping. It's like, well, the earlier you get them started, the earlier you get them used to it, and the sooner they're probably going to like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, if you take an 8-year-old who's just used to playing on his tablet all day and you put him in a tent, like, he's probably not going to enjoy himself. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a dad. I don't have kids yet. So I'm sure it's all harder than what what I'm making it out to be. But I think that's probably the appropriate strategy, is to just expose them to it. I mean, early. I mean, even before they're 1 year old, just get one of those little backpack things that the kid slides in and just start walking. Mm-hmm. And just I think really kind of instilling the idea about having a balance, work-life relaxation balance. I mean, me, I like to play my video games, but I also like to be outdoors, so I don't like to let my video games consume my life,
Right.
And so I think that's also going to have to be a lesson that's going to have to be taught, especially in this younger generation, which video games have become so insanely popular. So I think that's going to be a challenge moving forward.
But like you said, that there'll be a time and a place for those, but it's not going to be so one-sided, because video games, they can be fun, but there's also been instances where videos can distort like a sense of reality amongst kids. And then of course video games can be really violent, with like, especially with how realistic they are in this day and age. So, but and then there's also I hear of a lot of people talk about like using like things like the outdoor. You brought up the example of the outdoors, going camping, maybe getting them out in a tent on a night, or walking them through the woods or something like that. And they kind of view nature as a means to kind of create like a rite of passage, sort of like, for kids. Would you see maybe you doing something like that with your kids too someday? Like actually maybe taking them to some of your favorite spots and basically really kind of just creating like a more immersive, and I guess I'll even say like a challenging experience too, because nature can be challenging. What are your thoughts on maybe doing like rites of passage? Do you see that potentially kind of coming into the picture someday?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I have my places that I've been to multiple times, and I think it would be awesome to have one day maybe having a 10 and a 12-year-old and we go all the way up to, because they're going to hear the stories growing up of Isle Royale, and, it'd be great to have them, go and, obviously, with some younger kids, it wouldn't be a 40-mile, trip like what we did,
Right.
but, you could do, Daisy Farm, which is a 7-mile hike, and, camp out there for a night. And yeah, so I think we set goals for ourselves, even as adults. So I think it's appropriate to do the same thing for children, and hopefully, they like it and they're motivated by it, and it's something that they want to do, with us. So.
Yeah, definitely. And, this is kind of seen throughout cultures of history. I'm an archaeologist, so obviously I got to, put on my, archaeological historical hat for a second. But, a lot of these rites of passages came in different cultures, and especially warrior cultures of the past, like the Vikings. They would introduce, their kids to glima, which is the Viking like sword fighting style, like around age 6. Then of course, like, the Spartans, they start the agoge to become Spartan warriors at age 7. So it's just but I think there is something that I think about, like getting kids out there to experience those kind of like challenging situations really kind of sets them up for like the rest of their lives. Kind of just the idea that life is going to be a struggle. It's fine, but you can adapt and overcome and come to it. So a lot of takeaways there for sure. So speaking of those things, going back and looking at some of your recent adventures that you had, what have been some of your own life lessons and your own takeaways that you've had, either from your time here in Florida, your time in Boston, or maybe anything else in between? Anything come to mind?
Well, I guess one of the parallels between hiking and life is if you work hard, and even if you struggle a little bit, but if you always have your eye on the prize and you keep working hard, you will be rewarded in some way. So whether that's in your own physical fitness or in your career, you're always going to be rewarded with your hard work. That's so, in backpacking, you're rewarded with, not only if you're with a good traveling partner, you're rewarded with the, shared experience and the conversations on the trail. Then you're rewarded with the beautiful vistas. And then at the end of the day, any food you have in your pack tastes amazing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Even if it's the worst food in the world, like I used to, when I first started backpacking, I used to bring Spam with me. I'd bring a can of Spam, and man, if I were to which obviously I don't buy Spam regularly, it's only been exclusively a backpacking thing. But if I were to eat a can of Spam right now, I think I'd want to throw up. Yeah. So I think that's the takeaway there.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention, it's also a really good feeling, finishing something like that though too, because I think by the time you and I we made it back to Rock Harbor, in Isle Royale, because I remember I was kind of struggling a couple of days. It's like my my legs were kind of starting to wear out a little bit, because you and I went up that big ridge that kind of cut the island in half a little bit, and it's just a really good feeling. Getting back and, accomplishing something like that though too. It was a rewarding thing. And then you and I, we kind of just hung out by the water, and, it was just nice just to be by the water and take all that in too. So right on. All right. So getting to the wrap up of our conversation now, some of these questions you've been asked already, but I'm kind of curious if maybe your answers might be a little bit different. As I do with my guests, I ask my guests to issue a challenge to our listeners. And this would be, what challenge would you issue to our listeners for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
Oh, yeah, geez. Yeah, I guess, a good one is to just go and, some people say once a day, but, it doesn't need to be this much. It could be once a month, once a year, whatever. Just go out, and if there's something you want to do, and even if it makes you uncomfortable doing it, just just go out and do it. Like I said, yeah, being uncomfortable is one of the best ways to grow as a person. You're forcing yourself out of your comfort zone to learn a new skill or experience something that you've never experienced before. And I think when you get over those initial humps of fear, really just opens up so many doors. One simple thing can, just domino effect into a bunch of different things. 18, 19-year-old me, if you were to tell me that it's like, oh, you've been to this many countries, you've hiked this many miles over this many mountains in this many different terrains, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But I think it all kind of started when I first went to college, and that was outside of my comfort zone.
Right. Yeah. It goes back to the saying is that, the comfort zone is a wonderful place, but nothing ever grows there.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, right on, man. Awesome. All right. So what I got for you next is my final three. And I'm curious if your answers to these, once again, have been different since the last time you've answered them. And the first of those questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Well, I think that this answer has changed. And Caitlin and I, we went to this one place when we were in the Philippines, and it was called Kawasan Falls. And it's like a trek that you do. And it was absolutely amazing. It was incredible. And it's canyoneering is the term for it there. And so basically you go to the top of this mountain and there's a river there. A lot of times you're hiking through the river, sometimes you're swimming, and sometimes you're walking on land. But you get to these points where the only way, well, not the only way, but the preferred way to proceed is to jump off a cliff into the river. So there's probably maybe 6 or 7 spots where you can jump into the river, and they all vary in height. And it's kind of nice because the first jump was pretty big, but over time, generally they get bigger. So you kind of work your way up to the big jump. And so, they measure everything in meters over there. So one jump's 8 meters, one jump's 4, there might be one that's 6 in there. Then there's the 10-meter jump. And then the last one, you can choose between 12 or 14 meters, which is over 40 feet.
Wow.
So you got to jump, and you got to clear the rocks and land, in the right spot. And so that was really cool. But just the environment that this whole river goes through is amazing. It's so cool. So that was on the island of Cebu. So if anybody plans to travel to the Philippines and they're on Cebu, definitely go do that. Because we paid for kind of just a private tour. It's a touristy thing. So, there's these large groups of people. But it was just me, Caitlin, and our tour guide, and it was phenomenal.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. Man, that's high. That's high to jump, for sure.
Yeah. So, I opted for the 12-meter one. I chickened out. So I didn't do the 14 one because you had to jump farther to clear the stuff below you.
Ah, gotcha.
But these tour guides, they come up and they jump all the time, and they're doing backflips and stuff like that, It's holy cow. Now I'm just going to jump. That's just straight.
Yeah, I would probably just jump straight too. I don't know if I could do all those tricks and stuff like that. With my luck, yeah, I'd bash my head on the side of the rock face or something. So, all right. Well, very, very cool. I didn't realize you all had done that. So yeah, that's a new story for me too. So cool, man. All right. So the next question that I have for you, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
I think the one thing that I'd like to do that I haven't done yet would be skydiving. And I know that's something that you've done a couple of times. So I think that's kind of the epitome of thrill seeking, so I think once you do that, you can do just about anything. Yeah.
Because, the thing about skydiving, this is what I've heard said about it before, is that as soon as you jump out of that plane, you're as good as dead until your parachute successfully opens. Because let's face it, if your parachute doesn't successfully open, there's no way you're making it through, through that experience. So so basically, I don't know, put it that way, it's a little bit more chilling. But I don't know, once you actually do get out of the plane, though, because there's a lot of nerves and build up, because it takes about like 15 minutes to actually get to the right altitude to jump. And, you got a lot of butterflies in your stomach as you're getting higher and higher. But once you actually get out of the plane, though, you're good to go. So so a little tip there for anyone who wants to go skydiving but might be nervous about it. Just get out of the plane, and then you're good. So, and maybe that's something we'll do the next time you're down here, because, one of the skydives that I have done was here in North Florida. So I know a place.
Okay.
All right. And the last question, and this is a two-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
So typically, I would say my favorite animal is the wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I've never seen this animal in the wild, but I know I've been close to him. Again, that was on Isle Royale. That was an Isle Royale experience. The one time I was there, we were staying in McCargo Cove, and you could hear them all through the night howling. And it rained that day, so the trails were muddy. So the next morning, the trails were just covered in their footprints because they used the trails at night to get around. But all those wolves have since passed, and they started the wolf reintroduction program onto Isle Royale.
Gotcha. Yeah, I do remember that about Isle Royale, is that you and I would be in some of the shelters at night and we'd hear them howl in the distance. And it was a little bit chilling because that that's their domain and that these are very powerful creatures. And, there's kind of sort of that sense of vulnerability, because it's like, we're not the top dogs on that island. And we're so far away from it all too. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it was one of like the most beautiful songs that I think nature could ever play. The sound of wolves like howling in the distance. It was pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, bro, that's it. That's all I have for you today, man. It was just glad we were able to make this happen. I appreciate you joining me for round 3. This is always kind of, I think, a nice kind of cool way to like wrap up a year of podcasting is just, get to catch up with you, hear about what you've been up to this past year. Obviously things have been a little bit tricky with the state of affairs that we've been dealing with this year, but since we're wrapping up, we don't have to dive into that too much. But I just appreciate you being here and sharing, your stories and some of your wisdom and insight with myself and listeners today, bro. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Always happy to be here.
All right, cool. All right. Well, I love you, bro. And I'll be seeing you soon.
Yeah. See you, Josh.